what your experiences of freedom are. What it feels like to be free, what it is to be free. Remember Nina Simone saying that for her, freedom was the absence of fear. For me, I think of freedom as a summer day with my window rolled down, driving a beautiful landscape. A freedom to be in our autonomy in the world. In the spiritual way of thinking about things, there are really two kinds of freedom. And I was discussing this on Tuesday in our discussion group with Reverend Jun Cho Lee, and he was saying it's a real limitation of our language, that we almost need two different words for freedom. On the one hand, there's the freedom to do whatever we want. And this is perhaps the freedom that we're most familiar with. This is the freedom that we kind of seek to embrace early on in our development. My children definitely understand this kind of freedom. The freedom to eat all the candy. The freedom to get any toy you want from the store. The freedom to do whatever you want. But we know, as we mature, we start to glimpse that maybe there's something a little bit bigger. Maybe there's a freedom that's even better than just doing whatever I want. Because eventually, as we grow and as we mature, we start to realize that there's for many of us, for most of us, for all of us, the way that we're built biologically is that we have these drives, these desires, this conditioning that is imprinted on us. This imprinted on us from our ancestors from long ago, and that is sort of continuing to be imprinted on us by our peers and media and the culture that we live in, that tells us that there's a lot of things that we want. And so eventually we start to realize that just having everything we want sometimes actually doesn't give us a feeling of freedom, actually gives us a feeling of slavery, of limitation. Because if we're constantly feeling this desire to have the things we want, and there's too many things that we want, we become kind of overloaded. Kids don't really get that. They want to eat all the chocolate, and maybe eventually they learn, oh, actually it gives me a bellyache. But once we're adults and we're out in the world, I think even young teens start to sort of glimpse, hey, but what is the freedom that I really want? What is it? Is there some freedom that's possible that's beyond just this get, me. And this other kind of freedom is the freedom of the spiritual life. It's simply spoken of as the freedom of following the Lord. And it's a freedom that is so kind of elusive, so deep, and so kind of beyond words, that anytime we try to put constrictures on this freedom, anytime we try to say, okay, well, yes, you can have this freedom if you do this and this and this, anytime we do that, we actually make this journey of freedom like that earlier, more immature freedom. And this is, in my estimation, the history of religious life on this planet has been this tug of war between God calling us to this freedom beyond all form, and then human beings building churches like this one and liturgies and denominations trying to give form to the formless, trying to establish discipline and routine and ideals that are believed to help shape us into beings that have a taste of this deeper freedom. And I don't believe those efforts are in vain. I don't believe we would be better off if no one had ever tried to create a a space or a structure or a set of laws or rules or behaviors that would help us to taste that freedom. I think all of that has been beautiful and creative and incredible. And for many people, all of that effort has also led them astray. It has made the possibility of incredible connectivity for certain individuals who were able to follow that path and then see beyond it. And then for many individuals, it has become something to cling to. Something that has not given them this sense of deep connectivity to God and to all it is, to self and to other, but instead been a set of rules and expectations and ways of being and identity that have kept them apart. It seems it's just what we do as human beings. And in large part, I believe it's because we get stuck in this first level of freedom, of wanting to do things the way we want to do them. And if that's still the attitude we have in religious spaces, then often we're very committed to the way we do things. And believing that we want to keep doing things the way we do things, and if you want to do things another way, then we don't have any time for you. We might not even acknowledge your goodness, your wholeness, our connection to you. This is the dance of freedom. And we can argue, why, and why does it have to be this way? Why did God? But I don't know how useful arguing with the way things are is. But what if we just acknowledge the way things are and wonder about it? This to me is the call of the new church. That's why Swedenborg wrote these books 300 years ago. He saw that there was going to have to be a new way to form the spiritual life. Because the old way of everyone doing things the same way was going to break down. And there's no greater evidence to that than our sparsely attended worship service this morning. Nobody comes to church anymore just because it looks good to their neighbor. No one is doing it anymore because of external coercion. We are now free to choose how to engage the spiritual life. And my estimation is at this point in our evolution, we don't quite know what to do with that freedom. For generations, humankind was gathered around one culture, one way. And there wasn't a lot of freedom to say, oh, well, no, I'm going to have a different identity than my ancestors, or I'm going to practice my life differently. That just wasn't even a part of the equation. But over the last few hundred years, that has become a huge part of the equation, where an incredible amount of freedom exists for each one of us, individually and collectively. And I think that all of us are a little bit unnerved by this freedom. I know when I was heading off to college, I was unnerved by this freedom. So I can do anything I want, I can be anyone, this was almost this disembodied feeling. When for so long, no, you couldn't be anything. You learned from your parents, you learned from your community, you were shaped and formed into a way of being that was known and understood. But that model has, in large part, broken down in our world. Now we are free. But what are we going to do with that freedom? Sadly, it feels like in this overwhelm, many people are seeking to quickly and happily abandon their freedom. The rise of all of these movements for fascist dictators around the globe feels like an abdication of this freedom. Almost a desire to be controlled, to be led, to be told that we're okay, that we're right, that we're good. In this world of mass media and this huge economy we live in, many of us abdicate our freedom to influencers or certain protocols or ways of being, and we say, yes, I admire that person, I'm going to be like them. I'm going to take on their habits or their ways of being. I'm going to join this clique or this, I'm going to like this company and I want to have it written on my clothes. All of these ways to find ourselves somehow. But none of this, to me, is really the freedom, the ultimate freedom that is possible for us. That is at the heart of the call of the new church. I think we're kind of grasping out of fear and not out of love. The heavenly freedom that we're called to is a freedom that is beyond all form. It's a treasure in heaven. It's the freedom that Jesus had that enabled him to be crucified, that enabled him to walk in incredibly challenging circumstances and to not be dissuaded. Heavenly freedom is the freedom beyond sin. It's the freedom beyond reactivity or acting out old stories or old patterns. It's the freedom beyond following some external ideal. It's the freedom beyond the desire for dominion over the other. It's the freedom beyond fear. It's this freedom of following the Lord. And that process of following the Lord at this moment in history is to recognize that love is our inheritance, and that love that created us, created everything. Everybody. All the people that we disagree with. All of the story, all of the possibility, that all of it is kin to us. I've been reading a book lately about that sort of encouraging humankind, especially parents. It's about parenting and community, that we can learn a lot from our animal friends. That as we study animal nature and stop thinking of ourselves as so separate from other animals, but start to see that they have wisdom that we could gain, it's sort of advocating for this return to what they, the term they use is an ethic of oneness. It's a beautiful book and it's a beautiful idea, and I believe it's very akin to our call of the new church. To return to an ethic of oneness, to see ourselves as not a part of nature, but actually nature itself, to see ourselves as fully embedded in life. And that in doing this, we can start to repair some of the harm that has occurred over the many centuries of humankind feeling themselves to be apart and in control of nature, in this transactional relationship that has done incredible harm to our planet. And I read this book and it's beautiful, and it's an example of this return to freedom. I read it and sometimes I'm like, oh, why can we just get in a time machine and go back a few thousand years and just start over? Like, can we just go back to communities that are more connected to the natural world and living in harmony? But the reality is we can't. We can't. So far we haven't invented the time machine. And perhaps we're not meant to. Because what a different experience it is now, after all of this history and all of this time and all of this formation, to now choose to go a different way. To now choose an ethic of oneness, not from a place of naivety and having no freedom or no choices, but now from a place of having a plethora of choices, so many choices, infinite number of choices. And to now, with that infinite number of choices, to choose to act in a way that respects the oneness of all life, that respects our connectivity. And when we make that choice now, versus the way that was just the way it was a few thousand years ago, when we make that choice now, what I think is really exciting and also probably a little overwhelming, which is why it's hard for people to make this choice, is what will we do? When our lives are built on disconnection, they're built on this ethic of dominion that's been rampant for so long. If we now make this choice to be following the Lord, this choice to honor the life within and without, seeing it all as connected, what will we do? Will we come to church? Will we... I don't even want to start to make suggestions because I believe that there will be an infinite number of responses. And fostering that spaciousness for diverse responses to this oneness of life, I believe, is the primary work of this era and of the life of this new church. To create space where we don't all come together conformed around one way of being or one way of understanding, but we create space and welcome for a diverse array of ways of being. I believe each of us is called to be our particular gift, our particular healing for the world, our particular something. We each have a little bit of medicine that our global community needs. And for that medicine to emerge, for that free life that is implanted within us to emerge, for us to be able to really follow it and fulfill it, what do we need to do that? That's my question. I think some of the things we need, we actually can learn by looking at our animal friends, looking at nature. How is life nurtured? Maybe we'll all need different things. This is the conversation. This is the work of this moment. And it's really different work than we've been doing. We're really good at developing organizations, religions, doctrines, dogmas, ways that we can all get behind and form around. We're really good at that. We've been doing that for a long time. But what does it look like to create space for connected community, a connected diversity? I think that's really new. It's happening. I believe it's happening in the world. People are finding ways to knit themselves back together in new formations of support and love and diversity. And I believe that kind of work is needed more and more everywhere all the time. And I don't think the answer to building this new network of diverse life is going to come from above down. It's not going to be a top-down determination. It's not going to be one leader saying, okay, let's all go this way. It's going to come within each life, each individual life, but not an individual all alone by themselves. Because there's something that happens when we get together with other people and we talk about what's emerging within, and we listen to our neighbor and hear what's emerging within, and something happens. Jesus told us this early on, where 2 or 3 are gathered, something happens. When we honor this call within and realize that the call is not just for our glory or our satisfaction or our fame or our self-importance, but that this call is for the purpose of the well-being and life and love of the whole. This is the freedom of the spiritual life. It's a freedom to do whatever we want, knowing that we're all connected to each other and that what we choose has an effect on the larger whole. It's incredibly difficult sometimes to discern, but it also might be really, really very simple. And we may just be missing it because we're so caught in the stories that we've been told for so long about what we should want and what we should do. I know for myself, I'm just getting started in this journey, and just being able to rest for a minute in silence, being able to not have an answer right away to a problem, is some of the ways I'm trying to do this work in my own heart. To trust that there is some bigger life that we are a part of, some big, beautiful life that has brought this universe into being. And we are a part of that bigger life. We are a drop of water in the ocean. We are not disconnected from that bigger life. The wisdom that forms this bigger life forms us as well. And the more grounded we can be in our bodies, in our being, I believe the more able we are to tap into that bigger life, that bigger wisdom. And maybe it won't call us to do anything grand or magnificent. It probably won't. It may just encourage us to sit still, to pay attention to the food that we eat, to the people that we love. We've been going at such a high pace for so long, it will probably call us to rest. So I pray that wherever you are on your journey, that you trust and know that you are connected to this higher life, and that there is the potential of a deep freedom within, a heavenly freedom, that no one else can tell you how to get to. There's no one particular secret path to, but that's always there and always present, and that may have the potential to transform and heal your life and the life of the people around you most closely, and maybe the life of everyone on this planet. May we not be overwhelmed by freedom so that we grasp the quickest fix, but rest in this freedom and see what it might call us to.